My name is Sixie. I just turned 18, and Cholera gave me the coming-of-age gifts. My parents' bodies were still warm when the coffin shop owner demanded 10 shillings, 8 any less, and he'd throw them into the gutter. Trembling, I handed over the family's only copper clock. But the owner said, "This clock is only worth the straw mats." Still, he took the clock, doing me a big favor. I thought I'd met a kind soul, only to later discover his ulterior motive. Then came something even crazier. A man blocked the door, threatening to send my 5 siblings to the workhouse. Furious, I turned into a shrew. "Whoever dares touch my family, I'll tear down their ancestral shrine." The man was truly frightened and left with a warning, "You'll regret this." How laughable. Those in despair fear no regret. A kind-hearted priest, seeing our plight, gave me some money to ease our immediate needs. I took my siblings to a distant town where flour was cheaper. There we met Matthew, who had just buried his parents. He not only gave us a ride but also convinced the flour merchant to sell us a small bag of flour at a lower price. The merchant's daughter, Rose, even shared bread with us and packed some for us to take. The pure fear, not hunger, but the sudden taste of kindness. It's more heartbreaking than a whip slash.
You're all so kind.
But who could have guessed that upon returning home, the landlord would deliver a fatal blow? "Move out by noon tomorrow," he said. "The house is needed for the next tenant." I searched desperately for shelter in the pouring rain, only to find my siblings had saved a piece of bread for me. I was starving, but I let them share it. This might be their last full meal, and I'd rather starve than see them go hungry. I watched them savor every bite. With pots and pans in hand, I led them to a cave. They were reluctant, so I shouted, "If you don't want to live in a cave, go to the workhouse." They shook their heads and followed me in. Shelter was solved, but the pressure to survive remained heavy. I couldn't support the family alone, so I found work for 13-year-old Jimmy and 11-year-old William in the coal mines. 15-year-old Mary and 12-year-old Bella became maids. Every Sunday we'd go to the river, collect large stones, and I built a stone wall at the cave entrance to fend off the coming winter. Matthew, learning of our plight, offered his help without hesitation. He not only helped dig the foundation but also brought lumber from his home to build us a small cabin. "It'll keep out the cold," he said. He was like a ray of light, illuminating my dark life. I thought things were looking up, but little did I know my brother endured daily abuse from the foreman for a meager wage. The deep gash on Jimmy's foot broke my heart. Life has never been kind to us, always pushing us deeper into the abyss. I struggled desperately, only to watch myself sink further. After Matthew treated Jimmy's wound, he offered to take Jimmy as his apprentice and find work for William at the flour mill. "They'll earn wages," he said, "with room and board." I was overwhelmed with gratitude, but saw worry on his face. His family was poor too. Yet, the next day, he made it happen. But there was no joy in his expression. Instead, he took my hand and said gravely,
"There's something else I've got to tell you. I just want you to know, Sissy, no matter what happens, me heart's yours. As long as it's in me body, it'll be like that."
I didn't understand his meaning, as if something monumental was about to happen. Before I could figure it out, he leaned in to kiss me. I willingly responded. On Sunday, my brothers returned, all smiles with plenty of food. "Rose gave it to us," they said. Curious, I pressed for details.
Yes, she's that happy just 'cause Matthew's asked her to marry him.
Matthew's promise was a cover for the impending farewell. My heart felt hollow. Life had played another cruel joke on me, and I lacked even the strength to cry. I never expected this to be just the first course of fate's feast. My younger brother Joe caught a rabbit from the manor's grounds, but the young mistress discovered it and threatened to send Joe to jail. She even beat him on the spot. Joe cried out for me, and I arrived to see the scene. I cursed Isabella as a demon and pulled Joe away. But the she-devil whipped me until I pushed her to the ground and fled with Joe. But fate was cruel. The next day we crossed paths again. Without a word, she knocked over my milk. Furious, I wanted to end her, but her brother intervened. Tried to separate us, but Isabella shoved him, using his weight to pin me down. While I was helpless, Isabella ordered her brother to continue. Clive drunk, lost control, acting like a beast. Terrified, Joe ran for help, but returned with Isabella's father. He arrived in seconds, but it was too late. My innocence, like the spilled milk, was lost in the dirt, irretrievable. At home, I removed the soiled dress and threw it into the fire. The flames consumed the fabric, but not my shame and pain. I hated this filthy world, where women are born in chains. Our voices are unheard, our pain ignored. Even when trampled and humiliated, we must endure in silence, because this world has never given us the power to choose. But how could I accept it? I vowed to tear open a crack in this filthy world for myself. But fate always targeted me. 6 weeks later, I experienced morning sickness. This clutch plot had become my reality. I touched my still flat belly. A mark of shame, yet also a continuation of life. Jimmy, outraged, told Matthew, who came to see me, vowing to confront the siblings and seek justice for me. But I stopped him. I didn't want to trouble him further, and Matthew was no match for the nobility. Heeding my words, Matthew dropped the matter but visited daily to help build the house. Watching him work diligently, I wished he weren't engaged. But reality is always crueler than fantasy. On my birthday, Jimmy gifted me a crib, promising to care for me and the baby. Seeing my brother so mature filled me with warmth. Meanwhile, Matthew, behind his fiance's back, visited me at night with a shawl. He repeatedly declared his love, leaving me conflicted. Only when he revealed the truth did I truly understand him.
Sissy, if it was up to me, I'd take the lot of you. And the one that's coming. But I can't even support my own family. I'm getting nowhere. Without this, we'd all of us starve, that's all. You've got to tell me you understand that.
Yes, that's something I do understand.
Sissy, do you love me?
I didn't respond immediately, as I pondered a question. And Matthew's next words confirmed my thoughts.
Let's stay like this a while. It may have to last us a lifetime.
His meaning was clear. He wanted me as his lifelong mistress. I smiled bitterly, my heart aching as if cut by a knife. Love couldn't overcome the allure of wealth. It was an invisible wall separating us, leaving no room for struggle. One day, what about pork offal for nourishment? But the butcher ignored me. He didn't even look my way. I left disappointed, only to have a woman throw stones at me, calling me a shameless whore. The stones hit my back, but her words cut deeper, piercing my already wounded heart. Tears welled up, but I forced them back. Yet fate wasn't done with me. The manor lord approached, noticing my bulging belly. He looked incredulous. Soon, an old man arrived at my door, but I was in pain as the baby was coming. I sent Joe for the midwife. Upon arrival, chased the old man away. But he refused to leave. He stood silently outside waiting. I went through hell and finally gave birth to the baby. But the midwife brought devastating news. Matthew and Rose were getting married. My heart was pierced again, the pain almost suffocating. The old man barged in, and upon learning it was a boy, he was overjoyed. A week later, he returned, introducing himself as the manor steward. He said it was the master's wish to invite me to the manor. I thought it was time to settle this once and for all, so I carried my child to the manor. The Lord only wanted to know one thing. Was this child his grandson? I told him the truth, that the Lord asked me to give up the child, offering me £1 a week. I, of course, refused. He then raised the offer to 45 shillings a week. It was tempting, but family is priceless. I still refused. Fate pushed me to the brink again. My sister Bellis told the master's heirloom scarfand was to be sent to court tomorrow, then to the reformatory. It was worse than working in the mines. A living hell. If Bella dared to run, the blame would fall on me. To save my sister, I had to hand my son over to the Lord, asking him to settle the matter. The Lord not only agreed to help but also promised me 5 gold coins a month. The steward escorted me back to the cave, but Bella said the steward was a good man. She had known he would help us. Hearing this, I wanted to slap her. She had never contributed a penny, yet acted so nonchalant.
There's nothing in your head except yourself.
At that moment, I felt an unprecedented exhaustion. I had lost my son to secure my sister's freedom, but the cost was too heavy. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew as long as I lived, I had to keep fighting. Word of me selling my child reached Matthew, and he rushed over to confront me. He demanded to know why I hadn't asked for his help. I cut straight to the point.
What could you have done? Fetched a packet of tea? A bag of oats? The boy's my son, Matthew. But he's Lord Fishel's grandson, and that's all that mattered. If you hadn't got him that way, you'd have found another.
Time passed, and I received 5 gold coins every month. But I still lived in the cave, with the coins piling up into a small hill. Meanwhile, Matthew inherited his father-in-law's estate and became a local tycoon. Yet he still told me the same old "I love you," with no intention of building a life with me. This made me resent him more.
I get so lonely without you, Sissy.
You think you know what it's like to be lonely. You made your own mind up, Matthew. You're a man of consequence now. And you have Rose to thank for that.
Once I sneaked into the manor to see my son, but Clive suddenly appeared behind me, scaring me half to death. I tried to run but ended up pinned beneath him again, but he apologized profusely, with no intention of harming me. When he confirmed I was there to see my son, he asked, "If you care so much about him, why did you sell him?" I had no choice but to explain my desperate decision. After that, he came to see me repeatedly, but I always turned him away. Until one day, he said he had a way to return my son to me. Only then did I let him in. He had signed a document acknowledging the child as his son. His father no longer had the right to interfere. His plan was to buy me a house in the community so I could move out of this gloomy cave. He also offered a large sum of money to educate the child. If I agreed, he hoped to visit his son occasionally. I was stunned. Then Matthew arrived. Learning that Matthew was a regular visitor, Clive tactfully left. When Matthew asked who the man was, he immediately wanted to chase him. But I stopped Matthew and explained Clive's intentions. Matthew didn't believe it, thinking Clive must have ulterior motives. I told Matthew to mind his own business and go home to take care of Rose. The next day, Clive brought my son to see me, leaving me shocked. He had been telling the truth all along. I hugged my son tightly, feeling immense gratitude toward Clive. For a while, it felt like we were a family of 3, playing in the open fields. Clive said the lawyer was still looking for a house, and it would take some time. Hearing this, I was even more moved. But I was still worried his father and sister wouldn't let go. The next day, Clive brought my son to the cave. Earlier, his sister had tried to take my son away, but Clive caught her. He chased after her, stopped her carriage, and kicked her out. Then he brought my son to the cave. Urging me to stay with him, he promised to finalize the house soon. But that afternoon, Isabella showed up with a gun, demanding I hand over the child. I refused, so she pointed the gun at me. Just then, Clive arrived, and seeing me in danger, he panicked and fired, hitting Isabella in the head. She fell from her horse and died instantly. I couldn't believe it. Clive, in his quest for redemption, had gone too far. Coming down, Clive was at a loss for what to do. Then Matthew arrived, and upon inspecting the scene, found blood on a rock. He concluded Clive hadn't killed her, but that the horse had thrown her, and she'd hit the rock. Together, they carried her to the river, making it look like she'd fallen from the horse. The next day I received a letter from Clive. He's returning to see tomorrow and had arranged for the house. He told me to find the lawyer at the address in the letter, who would handle everything. He prayed I could forgive him and over time, think kindly of him. He would always be my most loyal servant. Reading the letter, my heart was in turmoil. As I helped my son with his clothes, he said,
I don't like you.
Hearing this, my heart shattered. Tears streamed down my face. I didn't go to the lawyer but instead returned my son to the manor. The grandfather, overjoyed to have his grandson back, hugged him tightly. Then he invited me in, asking why I'd done this. I said, your grandson missed you. And I handed over the house and money, asking him to pass it to Clive. But he returned the documents, telling me to give them to Clive myself, as Clive wasn't leaving until evening. Then he called my son over and left us alone. Clive was confused by my actions, so I extended an olive branch.
But you couldn't make me son love me, could you? You couldn't do that.
Clive thought for a moment, then asked, what about Matthew? I calmly said he was doing well. Clive still blamed himself for tearing apart the people who loved each other, told him not to dwell on the past, that it was just a story born of hunger. The most important thing was I didn't regret having this child. I made myself clear, but this fool only kissed my hand and said he had to go. Such a blockhead deserved to be single for so long. Furious, I left the manor, but the steward opened the bag I'd left behind and found all the gold coins returned. The lord was deeply regretful. I thought it was over, but the blockhead came riding back. Asking me a question, I lied.
You know that Matthew loves you.
Yes, I know that.
When he helped me, he told me he'd always have first claim on you. Sissy, do you love him?
Yes. I think I did love him. He married the mill, not me. And I never loved him the way I think I could love someone.
Do you think you could... Sissy, this is hopeless. In a few hours I'll be back at sea. I'll be gone for a year. But it could be a lot longer than that. Unless I have someone to return to.
I hope you do come back.
Sissy, do you feel any kindness towards me?
Yes. And for a long while.
In the end, I moved my family into the community house, and my siblings lived comfortably. I want to tell everyone that true happiness isn't the absence of storms but seeing the rainbow amidst them. I've never considered myself a victim even in the darkest times. I've always been the master of my fate. Because while fate can take everything away, it can never take away our right to choose how we face it.